What comes to mind when you think of a Roman emperor? Perhaps you picture a man draped in regal robes, his head adorned with a laurel wreath, standing tall over an empire that stretched from Britain to Egypt. Maybe you imagine someone wielding absolute power, surrounded by legions, gladiators, and the decadent luxuries of the Roman court. But what if I told you that one of the most iconic Roman emperors, Marcus Aurelius, was not only a formidable ruler, but also a quiet philosopher, deeply invested in understanding the nature of life, duty, and death? Marcus Aurelius is often remembered as a philosopher king, a term not often associated with figures of immense power. And yet, despite ruling one of the greatest empires in history, his inner world was one of reflection, virtue, and Stoic thought. Behind the titles, the power, and the responsibilities lay a man engaged in an internal dialogue, an unending quest to live rightly, justly, and according to nature. And this, more than anything else, is what makes Marcus so compelling. You might be surprised to know that this Roman emperor wrote one of the most famous books of philosophy ever penned, Meditations. Yet this book wasn't written for scholars or citizens. It was a personal journal, a collection of private thoughts meant to guide himself through life's challenges. What makes Marcus Aurelius unique is how he balanced the unimaginable pressures of ruling an empire with the personal mission of living a virtuous life. His reign was one of the most turbulent in Roman history, but his legacy endures not because of military triumphs or grand conquests, but because of his wisdom. In a world where leaders are often defined by their external achievements, Marcus Aurelius reminds us that true greatness is found within. We would also like to meet you with your ideas in the comments section, which will guide your experience and search when you watch this video to the end. A Stoic philosopher on the throne. From the very beginning, Marcus Aurelius's path to the throne was unusual. Born in 121 AD, Marcus wasn't initially destined to become emperor. His family was well connected, but it was only through a series of political maneuvers and the favor of Emperor Hadrian that he found himself on the path to power. At the age of 17, he was adopted by Emperor Antoninus Pius, Hadrian's chosen successor, setting the stage for his eventual rule. But even as a young man, Marcus wasn't like other potential rulers. Where many future emperors would have reveled in luxury or sought fame through military feats, Marcus was deeply introspective. He was drawn to philosophy, particularly Stoicism, which preached discipline, virtue, and the acceptance of things outside our control. This might seem odd for someone who would one day wield ultimate power. Why would someone who could change the world around him care so much about controlling only his inner life? Stoicism taught Marcus that while he might control armies and govern an empire, the only true power lay in mastering oneself. As a Stoic, he believed that our external circumstances, riches, power, even the throne itself, were ultimately irrelevant to our happiness or fulfillment. What mattered was how we lived, how we reacted to challenges, and how we maintained our virtue in the face of adversity. From the outset, Marcus saw his role as emperor not as a right, but as a duty. He understood that he was merely a steward of Rome, and that his position was temporary, fleeting, and ultimately insignificant in the grand scheme of the universe. His reign was an opportunity to live out his Stoic ideals, to serve others, to practice self-control, and to face life's difficulties with calm and reason. The Meditations, a private journal for a public emperor. One of the most extraordinary aspects of Marcus Aurelius's legacy is that we have direct access to his thoughts. The work known as Meditations is essentially a series of personal writings, never meant to be shared with the public. They were written by Marcus during his military campaigns, far from the luxuries of Rome, under the harsh conditions of the battlefield. These writings are not a formal treatise on Stoic philosophy, nor are they instructions for governing an empire. Instead, they are the reflections of a man grappling with his own shortcomings, striving to remind himself of his principles amidst the chaos and challenges of daily life. It's as if we are reading his personal diary, filled with affirmations and reminders to stay true to his values. What makes meditation so powerful is its raw honesty. Marcus was fully aware of his own limitations and flaws. He often reminded himself to stay humble, to avoid the traps of vanity and self-importance that came with his role. Despite being the most powerful man in the world, he wrote, "Do not act as if you were going to live 10,000 years. Death hangs over you. While you live, while it is in your power, be good." It's easy to see why Meditations has resonated with readers throughout the centuries. Marcus speaks to the universal human experience. He writes about loss, fear, duty, and the importance of integrity, all things we still struggle with today. In an age where rulers were often seen as distant and divine figures, Marcus reveals himself as deeply human. His struggles are our struggles. Marcus Aurelius and the weight of leadership. To understand Marcus Aurelius fully, we need to place his philosophy within the context of his reign. His time as emperor was far from peaceful or easy. Unlike many of his predecessors who basked in Rome's glory, Marcus ruled during a time of constant crisis. His reign was marked by nearly unrelenting war and a devastating pandemic, the Antonine Plague, that swept across the empire, killing millions. It would have been easy for Marcus to let the pressures of leadership overwhelm him. He was, after all, not just a philosopher, but also a general, a diplomat, and a ruler responsible for the welfare of millions. He spent much of his reign on the front lines, personally leading campaigns against invading barbarian tribes. His life was one of hardship and sacrifice, far removed from the luxuries we might imagine when thinking of Roman emperors. In the midst of these trials, Marcus turned to his Stoic beliefs. His philosophy provided him with a framework for dealing with the unpredictability of life. Rather than fight against misfortune, he sought to accept it as part of the natural order of the world. He believed that everything, even suffering, had a purpose, and that his role as emperor was to fulfill his duties without complaint or bitterness. What comes to mind when you think of a Roman emperor? Perhaps you picture a man draped in regal robes, his head adorned with a laurel wreath, standing tall over an empire that stretched from Britain to Egypt. Maybe you imagine someone wielding absolute power, surrounded by legions, gladiators, and the decadent luxuries of the Roman court. But what if I told you that one of the most iconic Roman emperors, Marcus Aurelius, was not only a formidable ruler, but also a quiet philosopher, deeply invested in understanding the nature of life, duty, and death? Marcus Aurelius is often remembered as a philosopher king, a term not often associated with figures of immense power. And yet, despite ruling one of the greatest empires in history, his inner world was one of reflection, virtue, and Stoic thought. Behind the titles, the power, and the responsibilities lay a man engaged in an internal dialogue, an unending quest to live rightly, justly, and according to nature. And this, more than anything else, is what makes Marcus so compelling. You might be surprised to know that this Roman emperor wrote one of the most famous books of philosophy ever penned, Meditations. Yet this book wasn't written for scholars or citizens. It was a personal journal, a collection of private thoughts meant to guide himself through life's challenges. What makes Marcus Aurelius unique is how he balanced the unimaginable pressures of ruling an empire with the personal mission of living a virtuous life. His reign was one of the most turbulent in Roman history, but his legacy endures not because of military triumphs or grand conquests, but because of his wisdom. In a world where leaders are often defined by their external achievements, Marcus Aurelius reminds us that true greatness is found within.
Dear listeners, we want to use your opinions as guidance for our videos, so you can send us your positive or negative opinions in the comments section. If your opinion about our content is positive, you can write 0 if not 1 in the comments section. I also see that we have new subscribers who have just joined us. We would like to welcome you with a sweet welcome. Can those who have just subscribed write "I subscribed" in the comments section?
His words were not just reflections on mortality, but also a reminder to himself to live with purpose, to fulfill his duty even in the face of personal danger. The human side of Marcus Aurelius. It's easy to get lost in the grandeur of Marcus Aurelius as an emperor, philosopher, and Stoic sage. From the outside, his life appears to be one of immense power, control, and intellectual mastery. But beyond the titles and the achievements was a man, someone who struggled with the same emotions, uncertainties, and grief that we all face. Marcus Aurelius wasn't just a distant, idealized figure of history. He was a father, a husband, a friend, and a leader who faced personal tragedies that would have broken the spirits of many. Yet, through it all, he remained resilient, embodying the virtues he so often wrote about in Meditations. A family man in the heart of an empire. Marcus Aurelius's family life is often overshadowed by his public persona. He was not only a ruler of a vast empire, but also a devoted husband and father. He married Faustina the Younger, a woman of noble birth, and their relationship was filled with both affection and trials. By all accounts, their marriage was one of mutual respect and deep emotional connection. However, life in the ancient world was fraught with danger, and even those in the highest echelons of society were not immune to the painful realities of illness and death. Together, Marcus and Faustina had 13 children, a staggering number by today's standards, but not uncommon for the time. Despite their noble status, they endured the same anxieties that all parents face: the fragility of life. Of their 13 children, only a handful survived into adulthood, a harsh reminder of the precariousness of life in the ancient world. Each loss must have weighed heavily on Marcus, especially as a father who understood the impermanence of life, but was still bound by the emotional ties of family. In Meditations, we don't find Marcus dwelling extensively on the personal details of his grief, but we know from his philosophy that he felt it deeply. He believed that suffering and loss were inevitable parts of life, and it's likely that his own personal tragedies helped shape his Stoic outlook. He writes, "Loss is nothing else but change, and change is nature's delight." It's a striking statement, not because it diminishes the pain of loss, but because it reflects his deep commitment to accepting what cannot be changed with grace and wisdom. The Tragic Loss of Faustina. One of the most profound personal tragedies Marcus faced was the loss of his wife, Faustina. Their marriage lasted over 30 years, a considerable amount of time in a world where life expectancy was uncertain. While much of the public record about Faustina is shrouded in rumor and political gossip, some even accused her of infidelity, Marcus's writings reflect a deep love and respect for her. It's important to note that historical accounts often blend fact and fiction, and the rumors about Faustina's character were likely exaggerated by political rivals or historians with an agenda. Marcus, on the other hand, never gave any credence to these claims. In fact, he honored her after her death with a temple and the title of Diva Faustina, showing his devotion and affection. Losing a spouse in the ancient world, particularly one who had been such a steady presence, would have been an emotional earthquake for Marcus. Yet, he never let his grief paralyze him. Instead, he absorbed it into his Stoic practice, continuing to focus on his responsibilities as emperor and philosopher. His writings reveal the tension between his personal loss and his philosophical commitment to accepting the natural course of life. He knew that death was an inevitable part of existence, yet that knowledge didn't make the loss any less real or painful. Even as he honored Faustina with monuments and public tributes, his private writings likely carried the deeper, unspoken pain of a man who had lost his companion. Stoicism did not encourage the denial of feelings, but rather the proper management of them. Marcus would have mourned, as any loving husband would, but he also believed in moving forward with purpose and continuing to live a virtuous life, no matter the personal cost. The agony of losing children. The loss of children was one of the most heart-wrenching aspects of Marcus Aurelius's life. Out of his 13 children, only 5 survived into adulthood. This staggering number of deaths would be unimaginable today. But in ancient Rome, high infant and child mortality rates were sadly common, even for emperors. Despite being able to provide the best medical care available at the time, Marcus could not shield his family from the harsh realities of disease and early death. As a father, Marcus would have felt each loss deeply. The death of a child is one of the most profound pains any parent can experience, and it's hard to imagine the emotional toll it took on him. Yet, his philosophical reflections on the transience of life offer a window into how he coped. In Meditations, he often reflects on the nature of life and death, reminding himself that all things are temporary, including the lives of those we hold most dear. He writes, "What dies does not pass out of the universe. If it stays here and changes, it is dissolved into its parts, which are elements of the universe and of you." These reflections are not cold dismissals of his grief, but rather a method of enduring it. Stoicism teaches that death is not an evil, but a natural part of the cycle of life. Marcus would have faced his children's deaths with sadness, but also with a firm resolve to accept what was beyond his control. It's likely that the pain of loss deepened his Stoic practice, forcing him to confront the most difficult aspect of human existence, the impermanence of everything we love. Stoicism in the face of personal grief. While it's tempting to view Stoicism as a philosophy of emotional detachment, Marcus Aurelius's life shows us that Stoicism is not about avoiding emotion, but about managing it with wisdom and clarity. Marcus felt the same range of emotions that we do: grief, love, fear, but he understood that letting those emotions rule him would lead to a life of misery and chaos. What we can learn from Marcus Aurelius today. In today's world, we often equate success with wealth, fame, or power. Yet Marcus Aurelius, one of the most powerful men in history, reminds us that these things are fleeting. His life and writings show us that true fulfillment comes not from external achievements, but from cultivating inner strength, wisdom, and virtue. Marcus's reflections on life, death, and duty are as relevant today as they were in the ancient world. We all face challenges, whether personal, professional, or societal, and it's easy to become overwhelmed or disheartened. But Marcus reminds us that while we may not control the events around us, we always control how we respond. His life is a testament to the power of Stoic philosophy, which teaches us to focus on what we can control, to accept what we cannot change, and to live in accordance with our highest values. Marcus Aurelius may have ruled an empire, but his greatest conquest was the mastery of himself. Conclusion: the timeless wisdom of Marcus Aurelius. As we conclude this exploration of Marcus Aurelius, it's important to remember that his story is not just about a powerful emperor or a wise philosopher. It's about a human being striving to live a good life amidst extraordinary circumstances. His legacy endures not because of his victories on the battlefield, but because of his victories within. Marcus Aurelius reminds us that even in the most chaotic and challenging times, we can find peace, purpose, and strength by turning inward. His philosophy offers a roadmap for navigating the complexities of life with grace and resilience. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the life and thoughts of Marcus Aurelius. If you found his wisdom inspiring, be sure to subscribe to the Stoic Herology channel, where we continue to explore the lives of great Stoic philosophers. Don't forget to like this video, leave your thoughts in the comments, and stay tuned for more timeless lessons from the ancient world.